Welcome to tonight's webinar, the Medical Student Webinar, Meeting Orthopedic Surgery Residents, Preparing for the 2021 Residency Application Season. This webinar is a collaborative effort with Ruth Jackson Orthopedic Society and the American Medical Women's Association. We would like to extend a special thank you to AOFAS for allowing us to utilize their webinar platform to produce this webinar. I'd like to run through a few housekeeping items before we kick off tonight's webinar. Please make sure your speakers are turned on and that the volume is turned up. For technical assistance, you can reference the Help tab at any time. If you have any technical difficulties, your best bet is to close all browsers and log back in the same way you did the first time. If you experience any buffering issues, please refresh your browser. We are recording this webinar and will provide the recording within 1 week. We encourage you to ask questions. We will have 20 minutes at the end for questions. Please send your message to the panelists by clicking on the question mark icon on the bottom of the right of your navigation column. I would now like to turn this webinar over to our moderator, RJOS President, Dr. Dawn Laporte. Dr. Laporte, please begin.
Thank you, Deborah. On behalf of the Ruth Jackson Orthopedic Society, it's my pleasure to welcome you all to this webinar this evening, the second in a series of webinars for women interested in orthopedic surgery. We're very excited to see nearly 200 women join. The goal of tonight is that you get to hear about the application process from the resident perspective, from residents from different years and different programs and from across the country. I'd like to next introduce Dr. Kim Templeton from the American Medical Women's Association, and then we'll turn over the program to Dr. Kirsten Ross, Chief Resident of Vanderbilt, who will lead the session tonight.
Thank you very much, Dr. Laporte. I'd like to thank all of our attendees and especially thank all of our residents that have taken time from their busy schedules to spend it with us this evening. As was mentioned, I'm Kim Templeton. I'm proud to be past president of both Ruth Jackson Orthopedic Society and the American Medical Women's Association. So I would like to welcome you on behalf of the American Medical Women's Association. If you were with us in our initial webinar, we discussed that this would be a series of presentations. The next webinars that we'll be setting up, and you'll be hearing about this in the near future, is for students to sign on so that they can do some practice interviews so we can all learn how to navigate this new world of virtual interviewing. And at this point, we will turn this over to the residents. I'm actually going to be leaving the webinar because I want you guys to have an open discussion, and I look forward to meeting all of you later. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Laporte. Thank you, Dr. Templeton. My name is Kirsten. I'm a PGY5 resident at Vanderbilt. I'd also like to thank Dr. Kogan, who's from Rush, and Dr. Holt, who's my program director from Vanderbilt, who also helped us put together this webinar and gave us a lot of feedback when we were planning it. So there's a few things that we want to do tonight. First of all, we want to introduce ourselves and tell you kind of our background and how we got into orthopedics. And then in the second part, we organized a group of 3 talks, and we're going to be going over different things about being a woman in ortho, and specifically this application cycle. And then lastly, we're going to give you a little spiel about each of our programs and how you know, us as women interact with other people in our program. And then we're going to have plenty of time for questions at the end. So like we discussed earlier, if you guys have questions, please put them in the question section of the webinar platform. Callie is going to be she's one of my residents, and she's going to be answering a lot of these questions via text as much as she can. But if she gets a lot of the same questions, we'll be addressing them as a group. So if we can go to the next slide. Like I said, my name's Kirsten. I'm a chief resident at Vanderbilt in Nashville. I actually grew up in central Pennsylvania in a really small town. I went to college at the University of Rochester in Rochester, New York, and then I went to medical school at Sidney Kimmel Medical College in Philadelphia. This was the first time I ever lived in the South. I was a Northeast person my whole life, and I've really enjoyed it living down here. And I went through the fellowship application process last year, and I'm going to be doing pediatric orthopedics at Boston Children's next year. So next slide. Go ahead, Allie.
Hi, folks. I'm Allie Dunham. I'm a PGY4 resident from Hopkins. I went to Maryland and Hopkins for undergrad, and then went to Hopkins for med school, and I'm still here for residency. I'm from Maryland, born and bred. I got interested in ortho by way of neurology, and actually one of my neuro mentors encouraged me to rotate on ortho as a med student 3, and I just felt like I found my people. I'll be applying into peds this fall.
All right, next slide.
Hi everyone, I'm Tiffany. I am currently a PGY3 at UCSF. I grew up in Southern California and decided it would be a good idea to move across the country to New Jersey for undergrad. And then after undergrad, I worked actually for 2 years as a healthcare consultant before going to medical school. I did also take a research year, so if anyone has any questions about that, feel free to email me afterwards. And I am now currently at UCSF.
Hi everyone, my name is Juju Obioha and I'm one of the second-year residents over at RJOS. I'm originally from the East Coast and I spent most of my life in the DC area before I went to New Jersey for college and then Pittsburgh for medical school. As of now, I currently don't have any particular subspecialty interests. I'm just trying to keep an open mind.
Hi guys, I'm Callie. I am a PGY3 at Vanderbilt. Originally grew up in Florida and did medical school at the University of Florida. Again, I also don't know what I will be applying into fellowship-wise, but interested in sports, peds, or hand surgery.
Awesome. Okay, so the first thing that we wanted to talk about, and this is going to be really brief just to get kind of people thinking. I know this comes up a lot when you're third and fourth year about how do you even go about knowing what kind of programs that you even apply to or interview at. So one of the biggest things that we discussed that we wanted to make sure that you guys know is it's really important to know yourself and to know your goals for your career. That's fine, but at this point in your career, as a med student, you kind of should know yourself, how you learn, your family obligations. And if you need to, even just sitting down and writing those things down so you have them to look at and you can verbalize them to people is really important, because there are a ton of different programs out there, and knowing what your goals are going to help you figure out what kind of program is right for you. So for example, does location matter? Does it matter to you where you live in the country? Because if you want to live in the Northeast, it's probably going to be a waste of your time to look into programs around the West Coast if you know that's something that you definitely need to be in a certain part of the country. Are you somebody that wants to live in a city? Are you somebody that wants to live in a suburb, or do you want to get a rural experience? Are you somebody that wants to practice in a rural area and you want to train there? Like I said, do you have family obligations? Are you married? Do you have kids? That comes into play, and that's okay. That's okay if you have obligations. You just have to know that. And it is important when you're researching programs to talk to people about that. Are you couples matching? I know that if you are, it's definitely something that you want to talk to other residents about that have gone through the couples match. So it's okay to ask people, ask for advice from people that have done that. What are your research interests? Some people know that they want to be in an academic career when they are done with residency, and getting that experience in residency can be very helpful. Some programs will do an extra year. It's actually a separate match process. It'll be a separate program in the match. Some of them programs have a 5-year program and then also a 6-year program, and you have to apply to them separately. So knowing that can be helpful. Some programs will have you do a research year and choose who does it when you get there. So like only half the class does it and you choose it when you get there. And some programs don't have that opportunity. So make sure that you know your goals for research and know what those programs can offer you. other opportunities such as, doing global health, trips or research, policy, public health, all different kinds of programs are going to have different opportunities, and usually they'll advertise them, but sometimes they won't. So it's important to talk to residents, and if you're interested in something specific, asking people about that. And then I think one of the most important things is making sure that you have diversity in the programs on your list. Everybody knows that there's, the classic top tier programs, middle tier and lower tier. And I think it's very, very important that you have, you have top tier programs, you have middle tier, and you have lower tier, and you really get a diverse group of programs to apply to and interview at, and that is going to definitely increase your chances of matching. So those are just some things that I wanted to get us, kind of talking about or thinking about. And then Allie's going to kind of take over for the next slide and go over how to choose a program that's right for you.
Yeah, so kind of off the heels of that, PS, I couples matched, and I did a research here during residency and was part of that crew that was choose when you get there situation. So understanding if a program is right for you, as Kristen said, can be challenging, but like many things, problems become simpler if you can compartmentalize them and develop an organized plan of attack. I think you really just need to know two things to help you make your decision. You really need to know yourself, and then you also need to know the program. Knowing yourself can actually be the harder task here. Not all of us have had the bandwidth or time really to allow for that introspection. And like Kirsten said, it's really important. So if you're not yet sure what you like at this stage in the game, that's okay. There are several ways that you can try to figure that out. You'll learn more through sub-Is, even if they're virtual, as well as through interviews to help you figure this out. And don't be afraid to ask your close family or friends or significant others to help you figure out where you stand on this. Being true to yourself and being who you are is the most important thing, because residency is going to be your home for the at least 5 years, and you want to be happy, and everybody in the residency really does just want you to be happy. For a lot of us, residency is one of the first times that we're left to be truly independent adult learners. Think about if you're best fit for either a self-motivated, internally guided residency versus more of a guided mentorship, top-down type of thing tackled throughout. Do you tend to prioritize hands-on learning, or do you like following a reading curriculum and knowing what you're doing next week for education? And this can help you tackle the questions like residency structure and residency class size. What teams help you thrive? Every resident is raised into a surgeon by their surrounding villagers, and it's really important that you find villagers that you mesh with. Building a team takes into account the residents and the attendings and the relationships between them both. Think about what mentorship would look to you. Ask residents who their mentors have been and how they shape their residency experience. Attendings can obviously be mentors. Fellows can be mentors. Other residents can be mentors. And I would argue that some of your most impactful relationships in residency are going to be with your other residents, particularly your direct classmates and whoever your chiefs are your first and second year. Things intrinsic programs that might take a little digging, particularly this year, but is important. Can you find someone who looks like you? So did you see other women? Were they attendings? Were they residents? What stage of the career were they in? And did the program make it easy for you to talk to other women? When was the last female resident, if there's none currently? And we're going to discuss this a little bit more in a bit, so I don't want to jump ahead too much. Asking all residents to reflect on their program is important. Every resident should have either a favorite thing that they like about their residency or something they hope that never changes. And every resident should know somehow how would they make their program better and where there's room for improvement. Details about rotation organization is getting lost in the weeds a little bit, but they're fairly variable among programs, so it's good to keep an ear to the ground for it. A mentorship model is where you work one-on-one with an attending during the entire block, versus a team-based model is where you work with a few different attendings and have several other residents that kind of help share the load amongst a larger service. Call can be night float versus a 24-hour call. A mixed call allows for more longitudinal relationships over an entire residency experience and repetitive exposure to specific injury patterns, particularly for those hard to get subspecialties like peds, onc, and hand for some programs. Traveling for subspecialties is fairly common in orthopedics. Some programs actually rotate to either a different hospital, either in the same city, or can even rotate to different cities or different states entirely. And this tends to be more common for things like peds, onc, and hand. And I really can't stress enough how important it is to just be yourself, because we want to help you find your home as much as that you want to find your own home. I think we're good to go.
Awesome. Yeah, next slide. All right,
So next,
Juju, you're up.
I'll be talking about navigating through this very unprecedented virtual interview season. My goal tonight is to give you all the most high yield information as far as getting through this process. So first and foremost, for residency interview season in general, which I still remember pretty well as I applied to residency only 2 years ago, the most important step is to really do your research. I know it's kind of been spoken about already, but an easy way to start this process is honestly with a simple web search. This means just looking up lists of residency programs and taking your time to peruse their websites. All, if not probably the majority of programs, have an individual web page dedicated to the residency that you can get more information from. I remember when I applied, I also thought it was helpful to keep an Excel sheet of all the programs I researched and documented pieces of information I found important, such as location, size of program, how many women they had, and things of that nature. So next, something that I imagine will be a bigger deal this interview season that I don't really recall existing when I applied, are dedicated social media pages for ortho residency programs. So many programs have an Instagram page at this point that highlights the program and gives some sense of what the residents are like. You don't by any means need to have an Instagram account or need to make a special like residency one to view these, because they're generally public and should be accessible even from a computer or just any web browser. So programs are spending a lot of time this season and a lot of energy trying to get the most up-to-date information to you online. So really use this to your advantage. Moreover, many residencies have also taken to hosting online webinars and educational lectures aimed at getting their programs more exposure and also supplementing the ortho knowledge that applicants this season are missing out on due to canceled away rotations. So these are not mandatory by any means, but I know some of you might find them helpful or interesting. So definitely, if you can go to them, feel free to try them out. And then lastly, with regard to research, if you know any residents in orthopedics, really feel free to reach out to them. Now more than ever, we're willing to talk to you, whether it's on a one-on-one basis or small groups, and just give you our firsthand knowledge. Many residents can tell you not only about their programs, but also their friends' programs, or even put you in contact with other of their friends. And similarly, I also think reaching out to other medical students, even those who aren't interested in ortho, can give some insight into how their ortho residency is perceived by the rest of the hospital, and even the ins and outs of that hospital system, or even just living and commuting in that city. So next, after you've completed your research, the next step is to make your list. So this can be a bit challenging as one of the key things to think about, kind of like Kirsten mentioned already, are the different tiers of programs and just making sure that you have diversity to your list. So including top tier, middle tier, and lower tier. The criteria that kind of defines these tiers is not really cut and dry, but you can make some inferences using web rankings like Doximity and US News, which I don't love, but you can also talk to mentors in the field as well as other residents that you trust. And also just, I really recommend everyone that does have a home program or a mentor that they trust, just sitting down with them or any other mentor that's gone through the process or actively involved in resident selection at your home program, just because they can really give you the best insight as far as where you stand. And just really working on having a well-rounded list is probably the single most important thing to ensure match success. And then of note, I didn't make a separate bullet point about this, but a barrier during the standard interview season that should not really exist this year is applicants not being able to attend like 40 or 50 interviews due to the high financial cost of traveling. Please really try not to overextend yourself, not to overcommit yourself, because you will in the end get burnt out and it'll show on the interviews. And then lastly, onto the interviews themselves. I'm not really sure if all programs are going to use Zoom. I think that's still kind of up in the air, but if you don't have the Zoom app yet somehow, just make sure that you download it and do some practice runs of interviews with family and friends, just to first off make sure you don't have any technical difficulties, like with your camera or your microphone, audio, internet connection, just basic things. Same as any other interview, make sure to have professional attire and really just try to pretend and envision that you're in the room with the interviewer. You can also try to set yourself up for success with good lighting and an appropriate non-distracting background as much as possible. And then lastly, through your practice runs, make sure you nix any nervous habits, fidgeting, eye contact avoidance, or just anything else that could come across as awkward to a stranger meeting you briefly just for the first time.
Awesome.
All right, so now that we've kind of covered, the logistics and given you some tips on how to interview and select the programs that are right for you, we thought it would be helpful to actually talk about what it's like to be a woman orthopedic resident who is in the thick of residency in a male-dominated field. So I wanted to start out by talking about pointing out some of the challenges that you will face as a woman in orthopedics. And, being a female resident in an orthopedics program is going to be different than being a male. And so, here on the left, I've listed some of the challenges that you will encounter and kind of talk through some personal experiences, and I'll turn this over to the panelists later as well so that they can add to this. First off, we as women, we do face certain stereotypes, such as being the nice one, being the one who's willing to listen, being the person who is just assumed that will take on some mentoring roles or educational roles. There will be microaggressions that you will face on a day-to-day basis, which as medical students, I'm sure you've already come across. For example, walking into a patient room and having them assume that you are the nurse and not the doctor, or, even if you're in the middle of a clinic visit, explaining to someone their diagnosis and treatment and having them interrupt you and ask if they're going to see the surgeon during the visit. All of these things can add up and they can contribute to a feeling of lacking self-confidence. I think that's something that is very common that we all face. Another thing that you may come across is feeling like, from time to time that you maybe don't fit in this old boys club. For example, if you're the only woman in the room and all the men are talking about the awesome mustaches that they're growing now that it's COVID and clinical work has slowed down a little bit, that might feel a little bit intimidating because you probably don't have too much to contribute there. And this will come up with your co-residents, with your faculty, even with reps in the OR as well. And, finally, kind of the big elephant in the room is imposter syndrome. So the feeling that you are a fraud, that you don't deserve to be where you are, questioning your abilities and, really discounting your natural abilities and saying that, hey, thinking that you've only gotten where you are because of luck or because of others. And these can all, I'm not saying that, men can't face these too, but I think this is more prevalent among women. And so just being aware that these do come up from time to time and making sure that you find a supportive network for yourself as you embark on residency. And so, it's not all bleak. I think one of the reasons why we wanted to include this was to tie this into how you can use this to help you find, again, the right program that for you that'll help you really thrive as a resident. And so this kind of ties back into what Ali was talking about earlier in terms of finding, and Kirsten, in terms of finding the program that's the right fit for you. So as Ali mentioned earlier, take a look at the residents in the program. Like she said, are there people that look like you? Take a look at how many women residents there are. If there aren't any, when was the last time that the program had a woman resident? look at the faculty members and see if there are any women on faculty. The question that follows is, does this really matter? You know, say that you interview at a program, you really like it, but there aren't any women residents. You know, does that mean that you automatically need to exclude that program from your list? You know, I think the answer is no. Right, this is where you have to really know yourself and what you need. And, you know, kind of the overarching theme that I want to highlight is that it's important to have support while you're on this path, and the support doesn't necessarily have to come in the form of other women. What's really important is having people that you can trust and mentors who care about you. And these mentors don't necessarily have to be women. Again, they can be men, but they have to be people that are going to be honest with you and who care about you as a person. Not just, you know, that person that you're doing a research project with who loves that you are going to add another publication to their resume. This is someone who really wants to see you be successful and be happy in your future career. And so what this all boils down to is, you know, throughout this interview season, really talk to the residents. Ask them what their experiences have been, what their relationships are like with co-residents, fellows, staff. Talk to both men and women and compare and contrast the answers. You know, if the women are giving you completely different answers than the men are giving you from that program, then yeah, maybe that's a warning sign, perhaps. But you know, I think this is the year of all years where we as residents recognize that we're all facing, you all are facing unique challenges. So we're open. We'd love to chat with you. We'd love to get you the best and most accurate information that we can about our program. So take advantage of that.
Awesome, thanks. So I think we can talk about this for like forever. I personally, I think talking about imposter syndrome is going to be really important. And I think just knowing that we all face imposter syndrome, and we all feel like, you know, going into a male-dominated field, that we're not good enough, and we've all had these thoughts. It just, you just have to recognize it within yourself and know that it's not true. And it's okay to talk to other people about it. I think, honestly, that's one of my biggest coping mechanisms with dealing with stress with work and, you know, residency, is just talking to people, finding people you trust to talk to, whether that's people in your class, your senior residents, your junior residents, your mentors, some, you know, faculty. I think that is maybe one of the most important things regarding residency, and it's going to be difficult this year, which is why we kind of wanted to give you some tips on how to try to parse that out on the virtual interview trail. Okay, so I think we're just going to take a few minutes just to kind of go over each of our programs and give a little plug for each of our programs, because we obviously like them a lot. And then we can kind of open it up and we can discuss some questions. So like I said before, I'm from Vanderbilt, and so is Callie, who's helping answer questions right now. Our program is made up of 5 per class, so we have 25 residents total. And right now we have 5 female residents, so it's about 20% female. And that's usually typical. We tend to average 1 to 2 females per class. Our program director is Dr. Holt, who is infamous, especially when you become a senior resident and get to go to the Miller Review course. She wins the best lecturer pretty often. And she's great. She's probably the best thing about our program. She is super supportive, very supportive about women in ortho, and has been a great resource for me throughout my past 4.5 years. We currently have 4 female faculty. We have 2 oncology, including Dr. Holt, 1 foot and ankle, and 1 pediatric ortho surgeon. We are actively recruiting right now. We just got a new chairman about a year ago, and so we're trying to grow our department, and he's actively looking for more women, which is exciting. And I put here, I wanted to talk about kind of the Vanderbilt Ortho family. And we really do consider ourselves a family. And that's one of the biggest reasons that I chose to come to Vanderbilt. I think Vanderbilt sometimes gets a bad rap because it's in the South, and we're actually going to kind of do some myth busting in a little bit about Southern programs. But it is a very women-friendly program, especially with Dr. Holt being our program director. As women residents, we're all really close. You can see pictures here. Like we go out to dinner all the time. The top picture is just us. Is us this past Saturday. We went out to dinner with Dr. Johnson. She's the one in the black dress. She's one of the peds that are ortho attending. We are doing a Women in Ortho book club. We're going to be reading a couple of different books that have nothing to do with ortho throughout the year. And the one we're reading right now is about women's suffrage because Tennessee played a huge part in women's suffrage. So we're learning about that. So we like to do different things, just us girls, because it is important to recognize that we are different than the men, and we it's okay for us to do things by ourselves and for us to support each other. So yeah, we also are very proud of our Instagram. So if you guys want to follow us, we try to do a lot of women's stuff on there too. So, all right, next.
Yeah, in addition to the Vanderbilt Instagram, which is now, I'm pretty sure, debuting like puppies of ortho, which is pretty darn cute. Hopkins also has an Instagram. It's just very simple, at Johns Hopkins Ortho, hashtag at me, whatever. And like Kirsten was saying, we really all just kind of all one big ortho family, both the men and the women, but particularly the women. We see each other at a whole ton of events. We read each other's lit, and we support each other from all over the nation. For example, I met Dr. Holt at one of our grand rounds, and here we are, webinaring, hooray. And here I've highlighted a few things about women in ortho at Hopkins and a few pictures of myself in orthopedic adventures. Our program has a pretty storied history of graduating many successful women of various backgrounds, races, ethnicity, and identifications. Several women have started families during residency and proving to everyone that it's possible. We currently have 5 female clinical attendings, and our women faculty are also leaders in the department. We have 3 division chiefs, 2 vice chairs, and presidents, including Dr. Laporte, RJOS president, Dr. Morris, MSTS president, and Dr. Laporte is our residency director. We currently have 7 out of 30 of our residents are women, and we do like to hang out a lot. Over here we see one of the residents' weddings, so it's kind of a picture of Allie and the boys. But it's nice to be flanked on all sides. More so to Tiffany's point about finding ways to fit in. I didn't have a picture of this, though. Should have put it in. We are all like human people. It might take some creativity to figure out how to fit in with the guys, but you can totally do it. And you can totally fit in with all of the girls. We did a St. Baldrick's event a few months ago where we raised money for childhood cancer. And as the little carrot of entertainment for fundraising, volunteers shaved their head. Well, I didn't want to fully shave my head, but I wanted to fit in and show support and show that we can all do it and all get involved. So I cut and donated my hair, which is why it's super long in all of these pictures. And now, not so much. I got a co-resident involved, and he tag teamed it with my husband, and they cut my hair over Zoom. And it was highly interactive and overall a really great community growth experiment. At Hopkins, our Instagram game is building, but our women fellowship is continuing to be strong. We do near monthly dinners with the rest of our women faculty. I've had many, many bottles of wine with Dr. Morris. I hang out with Dr. Laporte's family on the regular. There's a whole lot of camaraderie going on pretty much wherever you can find orthopedic women.
So at UCSF, we actually have self-termed our the women in our program the WINO group, or Women in Ortho. As of yesterday, when I made this slide, there are 31 faculty and 11 out of 36 of our residents are women, so nearly 1/3. And it's pretty consistent. We generally have, as you've noticed as you go down through the class years, there are 2 or 3 per class. What else about us? So that bottom left picture is a picture of us at our yearly graduation dinner for the chiefs. Our women faculty are awesome. They're very supportive. They're, it's just such a great experience to operate with them in the OR. It just always feels like such a treat. We do spend a lot of time together outside of work as well, as you can see from the other 3 pictures. I am very mad at myself that I did not put the UCSF Instagram handle on the slide. I think it's just UCSF.WINO. But as you can see from the bottom right picture, we do spend a good portion of our time trying to figure out how to stage the best shots for the gram. So that is, if you come to UCSF, we can help up your Instagram game. And our attendings are all very, very approachable, very friendly. There is, for example, there's one in particular who has been hosting weekly or bi-weekly wine nights, costume making nights. We make earrings as well. And so, it's just a very, very lovely, lovely supportive group. It's something that I think I've realized is a very, very nice to have. Could I have done residency without it? Probably, but has it made my experience so much more pleasant and supportive? Yeah, it has.
I think we're going to steal your WINO name. That's awesome.
Yeah, I totally agree. I already texted Dr. Laporte.
So a little bit more about my home program. So as I mentioned, that I'm at Rush over in Chicago. Our primary rotations are in Chicago at our main hospital, but we do have other clinical sites that we do go to broaden our overall residency experiences, including multiple level 1 trauma centers, the nearby county hospital, a dedicated children's hospital, and many very quick-paced outpatient surgery centers. So that's been really great to be a part of and just see the differences between the different centers. Our residency is comprised of 25 residents, so that's 5 per class, and we have a total of 4 women. So we do have women in all 3 of our most junior level residency classes, and I'm especially hopeful and confident that we'll continue this trend with time. So I'm very happy that we're able to have this webinar today, and I get to talk a little bit more about my program. So on the slide, I also have some information about our general clinical rotations and how our recent fellowship matches have been, all of which you can also see on our website as well. But otherwise, our program director is Dr. Monica Kogan, who is a peds ortho attending. And one thing that's been really great for me to be a part of since moving to Chicago is going to events for women in ortho that are usually organized by attendings or residents in the area that's primarily involved Rush residents, Northwestern residents, Loyola, and just other female ortho residents in the city. And so it's been really great to have that community and just knowing people beyond my individual residency program. But if anyone has any further questions, feel free to contact me directly.
Okay. I think the last slide gives us, yeah, just our contact info. Okay, so we've made it to the question and answer session part of our talk, and we're pretty much on time, which is I'm proud of us. So these are all our email addresses. One thing that we have not discussed, and I think we should, is how to kind of approach programs right now, just to make it known that you're interested in them, because that is hard without doing away rotations and without meeting them in person. So for our 4 residencies that are that we have here tonight, obviously you can contact any of us. We are more than happy to answer any questions about our programs. But I would encourage people to definitely reach out to residents. And right now it's pretty easy to find residents. You know, you can Google people, you can look them up on social media. They might have their emails on the program websites themselves. Feel free to reach out to those residents because they're going to be your best resource right now. And even like set up a phone call, which might even be easier than, you know, asking questions online. I know there was, it wasn't a woman, but it was a male medical student from somewhere in Texas was interested in our program, and he found me on social media, and we're going to be doing a phone call probably sometime later this week so he can ask me some questions. So that is probably the best way to reach out to people right now and get information, and don't be afraid to do that. Do you guys have any other ideas for how people can reach out to programs?
Like we mentioned, pretty much every program at this point in time is really strong in the Insta game, some stronger than others, but it's really challenged the way that we utilize social media. And if you send like a direct message through the department specific social media account, quickly introduce yourself, maybe like the top 3 things that make you jazzed, and what you may be wanting to talk to a resident specifically about, and whoever is manning the Instagram for that day or week or whatever will kind of filter you out to someone different. So don't feel like everybody's always bothering the same person all the time. Many hands make light work.
Agreed. Callie, are there any questions that we should go over right now before we kind of move on to some of our questions we made?
I thought one that would be good to address, and I think you guys had thought about addressing this earlier, is just how you all figured out whether or not you wanted female residents in your program, or if you were okay being the only female resident in a program, and navigating that whole decision of when you looked through residency programs and were applying.
Yeah, good question. Juju, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, sure. So for me, with at least specifically with my experience at Rush, when I interviewed, I got to meet one of the other female residents. And at the time, there was only one other female resident who I never got a chance to meet. And so it was really me just reaching out to that particular resident and asking her, you know, what's it been like for you being one of the only women in this program? Like, do you feel like attending treat you differently? Just things of that nature. And she said, honestly, I never really think about it, which I thought was just very interesting, because I feel like we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, like knowing that we're a minority in this field, going into it largely into like what we said was like a gentleman's club, like a boys club. And the fact that it's not something that bothers her, that she doesn't have to actively think about, it was something that kind of put me at ease. And just from talking to other of the guys in the program, and even now into like 2 years of this experience, I feel like she was totally right. Like I really don't think about it too much. And that's something I found reassuring, that I can just go into Rush, do my job, learn, and just have a good time.
Yeah,
I think
feel like I've had.
Go.
No, you go. Sorry. I think I'm delayed, but go ahead.
Okay. For me personally, I thought having women mentorship was going to be really important, but that's just me knowing who I am and what I like need moving forward. That's not to say that even some of my strongest advocates have been men in orthopedic surgery. And I think there are still several programs out there that have yet to have their first female resident, but most of those programs really are ready to have women in their residency program. And I think kind of to Juju's point, and I think Kristen said this earlier, it's important to talk to even the male residents, because if the male residents are blowing you off, or someone who doesn't classically look like you is blowing you off, then there you have your answer. Then that is not a supportive program. And that can even be true in programs that have a ton of women. It's less common. But if you don't feel like you can actually open up and figure out some of the questions, even low level, that you have as a medical student, you're not going to find success as a resident.
Tiffany, do you have any comments about your experience?
I agree with what, I think there are themes to pick out from what Juju and Ali were saying. I agree with all that. For me personally, I did want to be somewhere where there were women. Just knowing myself, so for me, I kind of used it as a filter when I was doing my research into programs. If there is, a page of 35 white men, maybe I just felt like maybe I wouldn't fit in there. But again, I think it depends very much on what you're looking for and, what you feel like you might need in a program. But I think to Allie's point, I think the field is changing and that, it may not, I think there are programs that even if there are no women there, like she said, the mentality is changing and they're probably ready for women. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a red flag.
And kind of just one little last thing to say about that, this pandemic has taught us that you can have folks on the same webinar in California, in Maryland, at Vanderbilt, and at Rush. The world of orthopedics is actually crazy small, and your network is big in terms of its span. So just because you may not be able to find the mentor of your dreams at your own institution, hopefully you can, but if you can't, you have a whole world of just tons of people behind you, and you can find an ally somewhere, even if it isn't in your own backyard. I think one of the quotes that I often like to reference is, "You can't be what you can't see," from Marian Edelman, prominent, civil rights activist and everything. But there are women in orthopedics, and there are successful leader women in orthopedics. You just need to open your eyes and find them wherever they are.
Yeah, I agree. I kind of agree with you, Tiffany. I realized as I was going through the away rotation cycle and interviews that I wanted some female mentors, and I wanted some senior residents that I could look up to and that kind of looked like me. That being said, there was one girl that was a year above me that I didn't really get to know very well because she was an intern when I was going through that cycle, and she wasn't really around because she was doing her general surgery rotations. And then there was only one girl that was 2 years older than her that I can really reach out to for advice about the program and kind of get her experiences as a woman in the program. So I also was looking for, the female role models, but you don't have to have a ton in a program. Sometimes it's only 1 or 2 people that you need. The few attendings that we do have, and the 1 or 2 residents in our class, I feel like we've really become a really close-knit group and we really support each other. So I think, asking the female residents, even if they only have a few or 1 or 2, like how they support each other and what they do together is really important too, just to kind of understand the atmosphere there. Okay. Do you guys want to talk about having kids in residency? And I know we don't all have kids, but we can talk about maybe people that we've known in our residency program and how they've experienced that. Allie, do you want to start?
Sure. I too do not have children, but Hopkins is what?
Does anybody have kids at Hopkins?
Yes, a ton of kids, tons of kids everywhere at Hopkins. The residency program at Hopkins has honestly like a really long storied history of having kids in residency, both from men and women. We've had several women within the past 5 years have kids. Usually it's during your 4th or 5th year, just because that's how it all shakes out in the wash. But I think pretty much every class that we've ever graduated has at least one resident that has like 2 kids at minimum. We went through one residency a couple years ago where every single resident had at least 1 kid. I think it's something important to think of. If you think that you and your partner are traveling down that path of starting a family during residency, if the residency program is actually towards the top of your list, to start thinking about maternity leave policies. Some institutions have blanket maternity leave policies, and some have department specific. Just investigating what those are and trying to figure out, well, is the expectation that I take a weekend off and then I'm back at it on Monday? No, that's crazy. So you need a little bit more support and understanding from that. And more programs nowadays are actually requiring that the men that have kids during residency take the same amount of maximum maternity leave time as the women do. So there's not any sort of stigma or guilt associated with women taking the full weeks. So cutting edge.
Does anybody have any residents that have had kids in the past couple of years, like females that have had kids?
So we, at UCSF, there was a chief who graduated a couple years ago who had a baby during residency. She was a research resident, so I think it was timed so that she either had the baby, I think, right before or during her research year to just kind of make that transition a little bit, easier. And one of our chiefs this year is currently pregnant. So that's all very exciting. So we will, obviously I haven't spoken to her in length about her parental leave plans, but we will, I know she has talked extensively with our associate PD about this. And so I know there are strong support systems in place. So I think that's for women having kids. I think for men having, a lot of our male residents have kids as well. And the one thing I would bring up is, in addition to parental leave, right after childbirth, I would just investigate childcare options in the area, and if there is anything through your residency program. So I think UCSF does offer some childcare, support or some of the program. And so I think just hearing my my co-residents talk, that is something that they've really appreciated and is very important.
Yeah, I know it is. It's something that's awkward to talk about on interviews because a lot of people want to know about it and you're afraid to ask. So I think it's really important to, if you're afraid to ask the male attendings, that's completely normal. I would not feel comfortable asking people that on an interview either, but it's okay to ask the female residents kind of what their experiences have been and what female residents have had kids in the program, and what support there's been for them. I know at Vanderbilt we have a resident, a PGY3 resident that's Callie's classmate that is pregnant right now. And it's been especially interesting during COVID, but she, she's still, when COVID first started, we did not allow her to go down to the ED&C consults anymore. But now that we've kind of sorted everything out, she's, working normally, and we've been really good with her about making her call schedule something that she can deal with. And she's due in October. So, in September, we just put all her call right in the beginning. So she is not, 39 weeks pregnant on call. And then she's doing a research rotation, which we have a research rotation the 3rd year. And she's doing that starting, in 3 weeks. So she's going to be on a research rotation, and so she'll have time to be able to take some time off. And it's really nice because actually our rotation schedules are really flexible, and we pretty much just choose them as a group. We get together as a class once a year, and we decide who wants to do what rotation when. And that is really nice to plan some life things around, and you have a little bit of flexibility there. One of the chiefs, she was a 5 when I was a 2. She also had a baby when she was a chief. So she was pregnant most of 4th year and then had a baby in the beginning of her chief year, and she was on a float rotation. So she was able to arrange her schedule around, when she had a little bit of free time. So our program has been really supportive of people having kids. There's a ton of kids that, the guys have a ton of kids. It's much more frequent for guys to have kids during residency than women, because it's just, I think, inherently easier. But it's not impossible if it's something that you are interested in and really want to pursue as, to start your family during residency. It is completely doable. And there's no one good time to have kids during your career. That's what all attendings, tell us all the time, is there's never a perfect time. So any time is a good time. And you can make it work. So you shouldn't be afraid that during your residency, that's not going to be something that's available to you, because it will be. I think some programs might be a little bit more supportive of others, and it's important to talk to the female residents about that, because they're going to have the most insight. Anything else?
But by no means do you feel like, by no means should you feel like, if you are the resident that did a research year, do not feel obligated to have kids, and feel free to drive the conversation away from that. And you should be empowered to take that residency year, or that research year rather, and do whatever you want from it. If kids aren't in your cards, that's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, totally agree. Let's see, what else should we talk about? Callie, is there anything else that has come up that people want to know about?
This kind of circles back to one that we have addressed a little bit earlier, but just when it's already an all-male program, how do we, in this virtual interview season, how do you figure out if they are female friendly? What interactions do you judge to say, I would be fine being the only girl in this program, I'm ready to do that, versus, especially when you can't go to an actual interview social and judge some interactions with the residents?
Yeah. Did anyone interview at programs that were all men when you interviewed?
Yeah.
I did.
You guys want to talk about that? Like those experiences?
Well, I've talked a lot. You should.
Yeah, no problem. I won't say what program. So they had one female who was an outgoing chief resident. I don't think I ever met her. So it was inherently just an all male program. And they seemed to be very female friendly, but almost to the extreme of pretty much any resident who talked to me, brought it up, oh yeah, we would love to have more women. We're so excited for women. We will treat you so great. I'm like, I don't want to be treated differently. I just want to be here. And so that was something where I feel like it's a double-edged sword. You want your male co-residents and your male attendings to be aware of the lack of females, but not to the extreme of, we're going to make everything down to you being a female. So it was interesting.
Yeah, I agree with that. Overly compensating is never a good thing, but completely failing to prepare is obviously also bad. Some of the programs that I interviewed at that were all men and were impressed by were ones that were way more down to earth, and actually their evening social the day before, or even their lunch the day of, incorporated their families. So they brought in the rest of the wives, any kids that were hanging around, any whatever. It just kind of opened it up. And being able to certainly talk to the guys in the program during the day, and them just treat me as actually equals and not overcompensating, and not being oh, she's fragile. And then also being able to see that the guys interacting with the other guys' families and everybody else was a big success in my book. But I'm also a very people, where's my home type of person. So
yeah, I think it's going to be hard this year for programs, I think, to recruit women if they don't have any women in their program, just because everything is going to be a little less personal via Zoom interviews. I guess my advice to try to figure out what those programs are all about, would be to I'm assuming you're going to get time with a program director, face to face online, and really kind of talk with them about their, what past women they've had, what those women's experiences have been. You can even ask them hard questions like, what do you think, why do you think you don't have women in your program right now? What have been some of the hurdles that you guys have faced in regards to women? And that can give you a really kind of good picture of what the program is like, to see why a program director thinks that they don't have any women. I think you asking them that, not going to throw them off, but it's going to make them tell you the answer, and it's going to make them either make something up, which hopefully you're going to be able to tell, or you'll be able to tell that they're telling the truth. So it's okay to ask those questions.
Kirsten, I did have one question on that, that just piggybacks that a little bit about how do you ask that question about diversity without coming off as like accusatory or criticizing, just like trying to be inquisitive?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can ask that, you just say that I'm very interested in being in a program that is really supportive of women, but I obviously recognize that you guys don't have any. Like I said, what are some of the hurdles that you guys have faced, and why don't you think you have any women? I think if you ask that, there's a tone you can have that's not going to be accusatory, and make sure that you kind of work it into a conversation normally. Don't just like change the topic and go and ask that question. Do any of you guys have any tips about that?
I will also say, I feel like a program where you ask a question about diversity or about like trouble recruiting different genders, that immediately takes it as like a weird, like accusatory, defensive type of thing. I don't know if that's the program for you.
Yeah. Yeah,
I mean, if you're looking for a place that's actively trying to recruit that, they should welcome questions like that, because that's something that they're working on and they want to brag about what they've been doing as far as their efforts.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Most programs now are really trying to actively recruit, a diverse group of residents. And if they are unprepared to answer that question, I think it is kind of a red flag. Any other questions, Callie?
What is one thing you wish you would have known to do differently when applying to residency? Can y'all hear me?
Tiffany, do you want to?
Oh. Hey, sorry, I think maybe you froze for a second. Let me think. I think there are a couple of things that come to mind. One is I wish I had asked more of those hard questions. I didn't really have the guts to do that when I was applying because, I was scared too. But I think that, maybe that could have helped me get a better picture into, how introspective a program is and how willing they are to actually change. And then the other thing that I wish I had done more was reached out more to residents. Being on the other side of it, I am actually very excited to talk to applicants because I love my program and I'm really excited to meet, future ortho residents, whether or not you end up in the program. If you talk to me and you feel like you don't really mesh with me or you're not really excited about UCSF, that's not really personal. It's not the best fit for you. And I don't want you to be here either if you don't think you're going to be happy. I want to help you. I'll put you in touch with someone else where I think you might be a good fit for that program instead. I wish I had done that more because, even in visiting programs, if you're only there for an interview, you spend maybe a few hours with the residents, stop chatting with them, and it's not quite enough time to get a really good feel for culture. So I wish I had done that more. And I think that this year is going to be a great year for you all because everyone recognizes that you're facing limitations and not being able to visit or do aways, and we're all more open than we have been in past years, I think, in recognizing that this is a really tough year.
Allie, Juju, do you have anything to say about that?
Sure. Shock, I know. I think that if there was one thing different, it would be slightly changing my mindset to realize that I was there for the interview. By virtue of me being there means that they were at least interested enough in me to interview me, and I had something worth selling, if you will. Getting there for the interview is probably the hardest part. You know, like there's boatloads of applicants and only a portion of them come to the interview. And once you're at that stage, I mean, don't get me wrong, you still have to be very serious, and you know, there's a lot of other applicants too. But it's also about the program selling themselves to you. It's not quite a buyer's market, but trying to think of it in that way can help you come over some of your insecurities, come over like, no, like I am a good applicant. Like maybe I didn't do the best on step one, but I am here, darn it, and I am worth it. And I am going to figure out what this program is and figure out if it's right for me. And just kind of owning it a little bit more would have been good for me.
Yeah, I second that, Allie. I don't think it was until maybe halfway through my interview season that I took more of the mindset of, you know, I deserve to be here. I put in the work and I'm just here to learn about them as much as they are about me. I think initially it's just so daunting. Like you feel just so grateful to even have an interview. You're like, I want to show you how good I am. And then all the nerves come in and it's just a really intimidating process. But yeah, I wish it hadn't been like that, but I really, looking back, I don't know how I could have gotten myself out of that mindset, even knowing now.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think understanding that everybody is thinking that way helps. I think being on the other side now as a resident and interviewing people, you do realize how much power you had as an interviewer, and that programs are trying to sell themselves to you as well. Like the interview is also for you to find out about programs as much as it is for them to find out about you. And taking that opportunity to learn as much as you can about a program, I think is probably the one thing that I maybe would have done differently. Sometimes it's hard because you don't know the questions to ask, but doing your research beforehand about a program and knowing, kind of the basic things about them before you interview can help you use the interview to kind of delve a little bit deeper and understand the culture of the place, instead of just asking basic questions on the interview. And if you do that also, they're gonna know that you are interested in them because you know about them already, and that goes a long way. Also, I think something I learned on the away rotations, that I didn't know that I think maybe some people will miss out on not being able to do away rotations is that there are different kinds of programs. And you kind of, where you go to med school, you think all programs are like that, but they're not. There are private programs, there are community programs, and the feel of those places are completely different. So understanding that, and this is kind of going full circle, and knowing yourself and knowing how you learn is really important. And I think that's going to be a little bit more difficult and challenging this year because people don't get to see different types of programs on their way rotation. So it's something you're going to have to be cognizant about, and maybe even ask on your interviews. Say, I know there's different kinds of programs. How would you classify yourself? How would you describe your program? Since I didn't get to experience, different places on the interview trail or on that away rotation cycle. That's probably going to be important this year. That's going to be different from other years. Okay, I think we're even 10 minutes over. Are there any questions, Callie, is there like one more quick question we can answer?
We probably don't have this, but it was the data on how many women applied last year. Is that in that report that comes out every year?
Yeah, it's run by the AAMC. It might be like, I'm not sure if they have last year's data published yet, but certainly the data the year before.
Okay, so yeah, so it's on the double AA, right, AAMC website.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Well,
it's not necessarily,
go ahead.
yeah, it's not necessarily like as broken down for specialty specific or like which state applying to which state, but you can kind of get like the 5-mile view of it.
Okay, well, I think we are out of time. Thank you everybody for listening. Like we said, we are all really excited to talk to people this year. So please email us. We can answer questions via email. We can set up phone calls. We are more than happy to talk and give you advice on the whole application process in general, as well as our programs. So again, thanks to RJOS and AMWA for having us. And we're excited to see the next webinars, and good luck on the interview cycle.